Thanks for joining us. We'll get started in just 1 minute. Make sure that you have subscribed to us on your favorite social media. Look up Birdland Sports on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. Like, follow, retweet, share. See you in a moment.
All right. Welcome back to Birdland Tonight. It is podcast takeover week. I am Ryan Blake, host of Give That Fan a Podcast. Cody, I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, Cody. I just like the duck. You can find me on Twitter, and occasionally I put out a podcast as well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. So we both do our podcasts solo, so we figured we'd team up for this podcast takeover week, and we're gonna have some fun. And I'm still learning the ropes here on StreamYard, but I have a banner, a little ticker. How about that? We've got our podcast names and our Twitter handles down at the bottom. So I think
that is good.
So if you want to follow us, if you're so inclined, feel free. You can find those links right there at the bottom. Now, we just got hit with a flurry of roster moves right before showtime. About a half an hour ago, the Orioles announced some moves. So I'll go ahead and rattle them off real quick. We signed left-handed pitcher Wade LeBlanc to a 1-year major league contract after releasing him just yesterday, I believe it was. We placed Chris Davis on the 60-day injured list. We saw that coming. We optioned Jahmai Jones, Richie Martin, and a little bit of a surprise left-handed pitcher Keegan Aiken to AAA, and we reassigned Fernando Abad and Chris Shaw to minor league camp. Cody, what are your knee-jerk reactions to these moves? What does this mean?
Yeah, obviously the big surprise is Keegan Aiken, right? I think everybody kind of had penciled Keegan in as kind of probably the third rotation, maybe even folks thought he was the number 2 guy in the rotation, behind Means. It was always the conversation all offseason and through spring training that, look, it was Means as the ace and then Aiken and Kramer in some form of 2 and 3. But, it's not surprising when you see how he's performed so far in spring training. He just has been really inconsistent, which is, the kid's really young. He was only up with the Orioles for a few weeks last year. Again, a truncated season, but I don't think that this is too alarming. It was a bit surprising, but I don't think it's something to absolutely worry about.
Yeah, it's definitely a surprise. I mean, we kind of like you said, expected Dean Kramer and Keegan Aiken to be that 2-3 punch behind John Means in the rotation, and I got to say, I'm currently in a slow fantasy draft, so we have a little time to pick, but it's a very deep dynasty league. Both Dean Kramer and Keegan Aiken were available.
Now, see, Ryan, I've got to check out here because I'm not sure if it was your connection that froze here, if we're still live, or if it's not, or if it's just me. But one of us is frozen. So if it's not me, I'll just kind of chime in with what I thought was going on as well, or some of my thoughts around Keegan Aiken. Reading some of Keegan Aiken's background, he's got a really strong minor league pedigree. I think he won some type of Cy Young award, or the minor league equivalent of a Cy Young award. The kid's got, I think he has the stuff. It looks like Ryan just lost power, so we'll see if he comes back here. And of course, Ryan logged in and had control of the. It looks like we're still live, so the show must go on. I'll see what I can do until Ryan logs back in here. Yeah, so I think that this is just kind of one of those learning pieces for Keegan Aiken. Look, not everybody comes up as a starting pitcher has immediate success, and never gets sent back down to the farm. So hopefully this is something that Keegan can kind of go back to and either find his form. Maybe he just needs a couple more starts. Look, spring training has been a bit odd last year. This is a lot of what baseball folks and management was worried about was, how is this going to affect this truncated season from last year? How is that going to affect pitchers in, this season? And, there's no doubt that Keegan will be back up. Not only Keegan, but, a lot of the other guys as well. Zach Lothar, Michael Baumann. We're going to see these guys, probably Alex Wells, who's been injured for most of spring training as well. We're going to see these guys, come back up eventually. It's just a matter of time. It's incredible to think of going from a 60-game season to 162 games and what that's going to mean for the pitchers and their arms. Not only that, I think that we're going to see a lot of additional free agents come. A lot of guys that didn't play maybe in 2020, they end up coming out, and playing this year. A guy that I keep kind of checking the tweets for to see if he's signed anywhere is Andrew Kashner. Hey, you're back. Look at that. Was it kind of one of those rolling blackouts, or
Holy
everything's
goodness.
okay? Zombies didn't come or anything like that? No, I still can't hear you, but I can see you. So at least, the one step further here. I've just been going on and on about how we're probably going to see a lot of pitchers roll through this. That it's not the last that we see from Keegan Aiken. As I was saying, one of the guys that I keep kind of keeping an eye out, Andrew Kashner. I want to see Kashner come back and maybe have another chance with the Orioles. Kashner, in 2019, before he got traded with the Red Sox, obviously one of the reasons that he was traded was that he was pitching fairly well, and he was a fun clubhouse guy. He was a fun guy to watch, and I think that he really helped. Looks like we're gonna. There we go. Nope. I think Kashner was one of those guys, like we're seeing with some of these other veterans, like Matt Harvey and Felix Hernandez, that are mentoring some of the younger guys. So I would like to see, more of that veteran presence come in. A lot of these guys as well, but if you looked back at the roster from 2019, guys like Aaron Brooks that ended up spending 2020 over in Asia pitching. Gabriel Ynoa, I think, if I remember that name right, was another guy. So these are the guys that it's like the Asher Wojciechowski pickup. They're just going to need to find guys, because I don't know if we have enough guys. I don't know if any team has enough guys with the way that they're talking about kind of running through pitchers. And I think that's part of what we're seeing with Hyde and the rest of the staff trying to, lengthen out some of these innings. We could see, somebody like Cesar Valdez in a starting role and pitch for 5 or 6 innings. The same, we could see guys like Travis Lakin Sr. come in and pitch 3 innings. We're just going to need to see these guys kind of go out. This idea of kind of a traditional bullpen that comes out for 1, maybe 2 innings. I think those guys are going to need to be stretched out to 2, 3. And you're going to see a lot more value placed on guys like Thomas Eshelman, who I think that once it comes time to, writing out the 26-man roster, and you see the value that somebody like Thomas Eshelman can bring, who can start for you, who can be a long man, a swing man from the bullpen. I think you're going to see a lot more of those guys rather than the fireball Tanner Scotts, Dylan Tates, the guys that are going to come in there and, throw 100 miles per hour. So, hey, are you back? I'm not catching much of the audio. It's like it's on a fast Zoom. Should we take a pause here and yeah, I can't catch what you're saying. I think I can
right.
hear you. Hey, look at that.
You can hear me? Because now I can't hear you.
I can hear. I'm
I
not
don't know
on
what
mute,
happened.
am I?
I mentioned on the thing, we lost power. I'm having audio issues now. So by all means, feel free to keep going if you want. I'm trying to get in touch with Josh because he's the tech guy here, but I need to figure out how to both hear you and be able to talk to you. So
That would be, that way we could actually
I'll
have a
let you take the reins
conversation.
if you'd like.
Okay, sure. Let's see here. So we're going to see a lot of different pitching. And it's going to be a lot of fun. I think that it's going to be interesting to see how, some of the front running teams, the LA Dodgers, the New York Yankees, even guys like the Blue Jays that are supposed to, have a run at it, the Padres, the Cardinals, how are they going to handle this issue of protecting pitchers, right? Especially guys that teams have invested heavily in, or teams like the Orioles that want to protect arms, like possibly a Dean Kramer, or even a John Means, those younger arms where they're hoping that these guys are going to have a 5-6 year long career, or they're about to go for a run at the championship. So that'll be interesting to see. I don't think it was too big of a surprise when we look at some of the other moves that the Orioles made. Jahmie Jones and Richie Martin being sent down. I think neither one of those. Well, especially Richie Martin didn't get much or didn't get enough at bats. I mean, he was a late arrival to spring training because he injured his hand while playing in the Dominican Summer League. And again, the last one being, Chris Davis going to the 60-day IL. That's no surprise there. At least we kind of got a little bit more information that it is a lower back strain. But we'll see. But I am surprised that they haven't mentioned anybody else that has for sure gone to the IL. I'm not sure. Ryan, are you back? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can. Look at that.
Beautiful.
We can have a conversation. Nice.
We made it. That took a little bit. I'm sorry for I had to do some troubleshooting there. The apartment, the power completely went out, the whole complex for a couple minutes, but I think we're finally back on track, still broadcasting, still live, and I have no idea what you've been talking about, but I guess I can let you steer us into whatever comes next.
I've been rambling about how it's going to be interesting with the pitching. It's listening to other teams talk about how they're going to have to figure ways to protect these arms, right? Because everybody's going from a full 162 game 2019 season to 60 games last year, and now another 162 games. So I've heard some people talk about how you might see a team go through as many as 30 pitchers throughout the season. So I think that the fact that Keegan Aiken is going down to Norfolk, he will for sure be back up, as well as the guys that we really haven't seen much. I anticipate seeing a lot of Michael Baumann, Zach Lothar, Zach Lothar, by the way, looked extremely good the other night. So I was happy to see that. And again, a lot of this is making room, I think, for the guys that don't have any options to be sent down, guys like Wade LeBlanc and Jorge Lopez, who looked, amazing tonight, at least from what I could tell on the radio broadcast. The last I checked when we started the podcast, we were actually ahead of the Yankees 2-0. Love the fact that Lopez is able to take on Garrett Cole, and the Orioles are holding their own. So that's fantastic to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned Zach Lothar, who's looked good in a small sample size. And, I spoke to Matt Blood on my podcast a few weeks ago, and he mentioned that the biggest difficulty in returning to somewhat of a normal season is going to be keeping players healthy. You mentioned we're coming off of a truncated season. A lot of pitchers didn't get any game time. So who knows what kind of innings these guys will be able to rack up. And, you make a good point that Aiken won't be down for long. There will certainly be plenty of starts to go around this year. And we'll see what happens, but the big thing is certainly keeping guys healthy, and especially with these young guys who haven't pitched a full season, it's going to be interesting to see. And I'm certainly looking forward to seeing how things shape up over the next couple weeks. And a lot of question marks still with the opening day roster and who's going to be in the rotation, who's going to be in the bullpen, and we're finally going to start to see that trickle down effect after these moves that were made tonight.
Yeah. One of the things I'm really interested to see is. Who ends up manning the bench for us? Do we go with a 13 or a 14 man pitching staff, and then how many spots behind obviously Cisco is there as our number 2 catcher, and probably Pat Valleca, and then who fills out the the additional 3rd spot? Do we carry a 3rd and a 4th player on the bench?
Well, Adley Rutschman hasn't been reassigned to minor league camp yet. Just throwing that out there. We'll see.
That is good to see. That's a good point.
No, yeah, we'll see what happens. I don't think we'll see Adley, certainly not at the beginning of the year, perhaps later down the road. But yeah, we'll certainly see how the bench shapes up. Speaking of roster moves that could potentially happen, this is something that you brought up to me earlier today. Anthony Santander has been out of the lineup for 3 straight games, and there is some speculation that his name has been once again floating around in trade discussions. What does he get traded? What do you think? What do you make of that?
It's an interesting time, and I think it's gonna be a big signal if he does, right? I mean, the White Sox. I'm blanking on who the White Sox just lost. Went up for a ball at the wall and tore his pectoral muscle.
Eloy Jimenez.
Yeah. So the White Sox are obviously now in the market for an additional outfielder. Santander definitely fits that bill. And again, this is the part where me as a fan gets a bit frustrated. Because I don't want to see us. I want to make a run. It's too early to. It's not even opening day yet. I don't want to see us give up on the season of seeing what this team could do, because you never know. We've had teams in the past that have come out and surprised us and made a playoff run. I felt like we were really close last year, even with the fact that we traded away our the bulk of our bullpen. So I'd like to see us not trade away Santander, give him a shot. Let's see what this team's made of, at least until June, July. Where is it looking? If it looks like, hey, it's a bit of a dumpster fire, and we can sell off some of these guys. Santander, I think Mancini's been talked about before. There's still a lot of I won't call them middle-aged, but older guys in our bullpen, the Sean Armstrongs, the Tanner Scotts that were talked about last year, and I just don't think that they received enough offers. I think those guys would probably be candidates, to Mike Elias as well. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with you just a little bit. I agree with much of your sentiment, but and I want to preface this by saying absolutely no disrespect to Anthony Santander, the country of Great Britain who fell in love with the guy. But to be completely honest, if I woke up to news tomorrow morning that he had been traded, it wouldn't bother me. And the reason being, if you look at well, first of all, his injury future is in question, and now that's something that we certainly see with Austin Hayes as well. 2 guys who are both playing very well this spring, Hayes in particular. But the fact of the matter is, the Orioles have, and this is something that we've talked about many times on this show and on my podcast, I'm sure on yours as well. We have a logjam in the outfield, and with guys like Hayes and DJ Stewart producing so well, of course Stewart, we're not sure if he'll be ready for opening day, but you've got Mountcastle out on the left, Yusniel Diaz knocking on the door, trying to find a spot perhaps for Cedric Mullins. And if you look at the current, and obviously this is a small sample size, but in spring training, if you look at the Orioles OPS leaders among qualified hitters, I'll start at number 7, Adley Rutschman. Number 6, Trey Mancini. The 5 above him are all outfielders. That's our one strength at the moment. And Santander, of course, contributes to that strength. However, he's a guy who I think right now perhaps is at the peak of what his value will be. I personally don't think he'll be part of the next great Orioles winning outfield. And he could bring back a good deal of prospects in a trade right now, especially like you mentioned, a team like the White Sox, who is in desperate need of an outfielder. They want to contend right now. A guy like Anthony Santander can certainly contribute in that way. And on a smaller scale, he's got a similar profile to Eloy Jimenez in terms of his offensive capabilities. But the big knock on Santander, in my opinion, is that he's just not a great on-base guy. He'll hit for average. He'll hit for power. He just doesn't get on base a ton. And there's something to be said about the skill set that he does bring to the table. Solid defense in the outfield in addition to what he can do at the plate. But you've got to have guys in your lineup who can consistently get on base. And Anthony Santander, for much of last season, was that guy. But if you look at his full body of work, that's an area where he's lacking, and something that I think we could fill in just fine with someone like Austin Hayes over in right field. Put Cedric Mullins in center, bump Hayes over to right, or any other way really.
Yeah, I definitely see what you're saying there. I do find that every time I've turned into a broadcast, they're talking about how many walks that Anthony Santander has had in spring training. Not that translates to the regular season.
That is true. That is a very good point.
But you're right. Let's talk about them. We've got DJ Stewart, we've got Ryan Mountcastle, Austin Hayes, Cedric Mullins, and Anthony Santander. Those are our 5 primary outfielders that we're working with today. Which 3 do you think provide the best defensive outfield?
If we're talking defensive outfield, I mean, I've got to take Mountcastle out of the picture, even though that's not realistic with his offense. But I would probably go defensively: Santander in right, Mullins in center, Hayes in left.
Yeah, absolutely. Mountcastle, he's learning. He's only been out there for about a year. I would love to see him at DH and then occasionally come in, once or twice a week and play out in left field as he kind of, grows into that position. But I love the idea of starting with those 3 guys and then kind of moving in, DJ Stewart once he's healthy, and let him play, a couple days a week out in right field. But I think that we're really going to need to up our defensive game in order to help out what looks to be some mediocre pitching.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll certainly see what happens in that regard. And don't forget about Yusniel Diaz knocking on the door as well. He's had a nice little spring in his own right. And obviously we want to see him have some more time in the minor leagues or at the alternate site. But he's a guy who could be knocking in a couple months.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I want to switch gears a little bit. It was announced today the Orioles Hall of Fame inductees for 2021 will be J.J. Hardy, Mike Devereaux, and Joe Angel. And the ceremony will also honor Mo Gaba, who was inducted a couple days before he passed away in 2020. And I got to say, that's a good-looking list. It really is. I'm a big J.J. Hardy fan myself. He's a guy who was brought over in the offseason before the 2011 season. And a big reason he stands out to me is that was the same offseason that the Orioles signed Vladimir Guerrero, three bats we wanted in the middle of the lineup to compete. And J.J. Hardy kind of flew under the radar as a signing that offseason. And he came and contributed for 7-8 years, I think, and very, very, consistent, solid defense, helped mentor guys like Manny Machado and Jonathan Scope. And he's a guy who I think we're going to remember very fondly in terms of the Orioles of this decade.
Do you feel like JJ was kind of built in the mold of Cal Ripken a bit? Did he kind of embody a lot of what I think Orioles fans kind of, grew to love about, that shortstop position and the expectations? Those are not easy shoes to fill, but I feel it kind of seems like JJ did that for the most part.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at a guy like Ripken compared to Hardy, and guys who showed up every day ready to play, fought through injuries. Hardy, especially near the end of his tenure, always seemed to be playing with some type of back issue or calf or shoulder or whatever it may be. But yeah, a guy who was the guy who everybody around him kind of gravitated to, and especially with young guys like Machado and Scope, who I mentioned. That's an important figure to have on the team, and Hardy was that guy for several years. And once we lost, Adam Jones and Nick Marchakis and guys like that, Hardy was still around for a couple of years to help with those younger guys. And I think that was a big reason for some of the success we've had.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well deserved for those guys, to be inducted like that. Absolutely.
Yeah, and Joe Angel, of course, 19 years with the Orioles. I fell asleep listening to the radio for much of my childhood, and Joe Angel or Fred Manfro were always on the call, and a guy I'll certainly remember fondly. We had his signature calls of "Wave it bye bye." The Orioles are in the win column. We'll be back with the lovely or not so lovely totals, and he's a guy, as I'm sure you will as well, remember fondly too.
I don't remember him at all. To be quite honest, I've only been an Orioles fan for 5 years, but I love that. And that kind of brings up another piece with, the amount of changes that the Orioles have made to the broadcast team. This has gotten brought up recently, but I love how, how important the broadcasters become to us fans, right? That soothing voice that familiar voice is something, especially as we kind of grow up, because we tune in and watch 162 times every year for multiple years. And it's nice to hear that voice. We feel like they're our friend. So when nice things happen to them, when they're kind of rewarded with that through a Hall of Fame induction, you feel like, hey, something really nice has happened to my friend. So I love that feeling for these guys.
Absolutely, and I will get to Devereaux in a second. I have a text from my dad that I wanted to share, but we've got a comment coming in from Brazil, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Orioles Twitter bracket that I just lost in the championship a couple days ago. But Brazil was one of the accounts that I was lucky enough to take down along the way, and man, they came out with a vengeance. They were recruiting help from the Seattle Seahawks Brazil page and the baseball teams all across, soccer, football, basketball, all over the place. And man, I gotta say, it took my A game to get past Brazil, but that was a lot of fun, and it's awesome that we've got Fabricio tuning in from Rio de Janeiro. So thanks for being here.
I love how international baseball seems to be going in countries where we really haven't had a presence in the past. Australia and one team that's actually in New Zealand they've got a really competitive league that Delvin Young actually plays in and actually pitched in not too long ago.
Yep.
There's actually a small competitive league in Italy now. So I'm really excited to see how the game is growing, and it's great to see the participation. You mentioned before the Anthony Santander UK fan club. Everybody that was such a fun game to watch as well. So I love to see the game impacting the international community in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's super cool. And you mentioned the Santander game. I mean, every time that video comes across my timeline, I can't help but smile. It's so much fun to watch the ball go in the air and Santander's camped under it, and Jim Hunter gives him a minute, and then you hear him and Bordick just busting a gut because the crowd erupts laughing, and it's great.
So much fun.
I'm going to bring in another comment as well from a minute ago. We were talking about Anthony Santander. He was 79th percentile in expected weighted on base average in 2020, which is a telltale sign that his bat is certainly valuable. And I don't mean to discredit any of that. I don't mean to try to act like on base percentage is the end all be all in terms of the way I look at players, because it's certainly not. But it is a factor in terms of where the value on the team is going to come in the future. And yeah, Santander certainly contributes in many ways. And I'm certainly not trying to discredit any of his contributions. I mean, last year he was our best hitter, simple as that, until he got hurt, of course. But he's a guy, like I said, who could bring in some pieces in a trade. And we'll see what happens. Obviously, I'd like him to stay here. I like the guy. I root for him. He's an Oriole. I can't not root for an Oriole. But we'll see what happens. And it's a business, and we've gotten rid of some guys who I've really liked in the last couple of years. And it's part of the process. So we'll certainly see what happens.
So Ryan, on that kind of the idea of kind of bringing something else in a trade. One of the nice things about spring training is that we do get to see some of these younger guys play. The Jordan Westbergs, the Ryland Bannons, Mason McCoy. So we see some of these younger guys get a little bit of playing time. You'd mentioned Yusniel Diaz, who's ready to come in, Ryan McKenna as well. What do you think that we need? So if we did trade something like an Anthony Santander, what would you like to see us get in return?
I want to see up the middle guys. Shortstop, second base, center field. You can never have too many catchers to work with the pitchers, although it seems like we're pretty loaded in that department. But the way I look at prospects, change positions all the time. We saw it with Manny Machado. He came up as a shortstop, ended up playing third base. There are plenty of examples of guys who are drafted as shortstop. Michael Givens was drafted as a shortstop and became a pitcher. But those are the athletes. The guys who play shortstop, center field, second base on their high school and college teams. Those are the athletes who you can develop and perhaps teach to play at least a league average third base or corner outfield. So you can never have too much wealth in terms of that up the middle talent. So if I were to my dream return for Santander would perhaps be, let's say, a shortstop and a center fielder from a team's top 25 prospects, just to add a little extra depth. guys who can back up people like you mentioned, Rylan Bannon, Mason McCoy, guys who all were shortstops when they started coming up, and now have started to move around the infield a little bit. So those are the guys you want in the organization, guys who are athletic and can play just about anywhere.
Yeah, I would definitely like to see us have a little bit more depth, see us have a little bit more competition there down in Bowie and Norfolk, just because so much of our middle infield is basically on a 1-year contract, right? Yolmer Sanchez, Freddie Galvis, Michael Franco, those are 1-year guys. So I don't know if we're going to sign them for longer term contracts. We don't really. Michael Ice doesn't have the history of that. So a little worried about if one of those guys go down. Do we have is it the Jahmai Jones and Richie Martins that come in to kind of as their backup, and does that still allow us to be competitive enough to go out there and face the Blue Jays and the Yankees?
Yeah, we'll certainly see. I mean, you guys can't speak. Guys like Gunnar Henderson even knocking on the door in the next year or two, and there's some speculation that he might move to third base. We'll see. But there's a lot of guys who could be knocking on the door soon, and it's exciting times for sure. So if I can steer back to the Orioles Hall of Fame, we've talked about Hardy, we've talked about Joe Angel. You're a relatively new Orioles fan. I'm a relatively young Orioles fan. So I texted my dad as I would, and I said, Mike Devereaux being inducted into the O's Hall of Fame. Can you give me a couple sentences about him? And my dad, in typical Mr. Blake fashion, he said, I wouldn't think he'd be Hall worthy. Guess I'd have to revisit his stats. But then he did follow that up with, I think the best thing that comes to mind is that he was one of the better players we had during some lean years and made the Orioles fun to watch. And that's the kind of guy who you want on your roster, someone to put butts in the seats. And I think Devereaux was that guy, which leads me in very nicely, actually, to another Oriole who was a bright spot in a dark time, Nick Marchakis. He announced his retirement. I believe it was about a week and a half ago now. Obviously, one of the more recognizable figures in this century for the Baltimore Orioles. Cody, what do you think is going to be Nick Marchakis' legacy?
I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be directly tied to Adam Jones. I mean, everybody is kind of talking about those years where they manned the right field and center field, and you just saw how much fun those guys had together as teammates. And he was probably for the past is there a better outfielder that we've had in the past 10, 15 years? Definitely not kind of a pair of outfielders like Adam Jones and Nick Marchakis. And I think it's great to serve as models for some of these guys, Anthony Santander, Cedric Mullins, Austin Hayes, as they kind of look. And I think that in a clubhouse, when you start talking about the Orioles Hall of Fame, that means something to those players and something that they'll probably see those guys around now that they're kind of, definitely when they come in for that induction, and then they're welcome anytime that they want. And there's a lot of advice that these guys can, just stroll into the, through batting practice, fielding exercises, whatever, and give a tip or two to these guys, just how they're made up.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's a guy who I think we'll certainly see in the Orioles Hall of Fame pretty soon. I'm not sure what the time frame is. I don't know if the Orioles have a set, after you retire, after you move on from the Orioles, it has to be X many years. For Hardy, it's only been 2 or 3 years. So it must not be a long turnaround time. So I think we'll see Marchakis get inducted pretty shortly. And it's great that the Orioles are going to honor Mo Gaba as well. He's a name that Oriole fans have become very familiar with. Unfortunately lost his battle with cancer at the age of 14 last year, but it's awesome that the Orioles are honoring him. It's really cool. He's just the second Orioles fan to be inducted into the Hall of Fame, along with Wild Bill Hagee. So Mo, we're always thinking about you, buddy, and we're excited to see the team honor you in whatever way they choose to do that next year.
I absolutely loved listening to the different radio shows and podcasts when Mo would come on. And
it was the best.
And I think that, for a lot of these young guys that are, in their 20s, to have a presence like that, somebody come around who's dealing with so many real challenges in life, to share that perspective with those players. You saw guys like Trey Mancini just absolutely latch on to Mo. And I think a lot of other guys around in the clubhouse recognize that, hey, there's other things more important than baseball. And it sure is great for us to kind of remember that this is just a game and that we have fans like Mo and what that means. So I think that those players around the clubhouse got just as much from Mo as the happiness that Mo got from just being a great Orioles fan.
Yeah, no doubt. And we certainly miss him and think about him every day. Now, Cody, you wanted to talk about the recent debacle with foreign substances.
The
So
goopy ball.
The goopy ball. I'm going to go ahead and let you take the lead on that one.
So there was a memo that got sent out. I've been listening to Buster Only's podcast the past couple of days, and he's kind of gone on and on about this memo that was sent out, throughout Major League Baseball, essentially outlining how they were going to use different tools, different analytical tools to monitor spin rate to see if they can kind of pick up and identify pitchers that might be using foreign substances. If they, think that somebody might be using a foreign substance on a baseball, they'll then take that baseball, send it out to a third-party lab. It will be investigated to see if there's any foreign substance on there. To Buster's point, look, you can see if a guy's doing this, right? You can see if he's kind of rubbing his neck or kind of reaching under here or maybe in his glove. And for the most part, people know that this is happening. Now, not only that, once you, kind of, unless it's going to be something like the umpire going up and asking to check the ball, looking at it and saying, look, there's something right here, you're out. I don't think that this is really going to be enough of a deterrent for these guys. Look, if they try to suspend somebody, they can always appeal that suspension and say, look, show me the train of custody. How did that ball get to the lab, and did anybody else touch it? How do you know that it was me that put it on there? So I think it's going to be really interesting to see, do we see a decline in pitchers using a foreign substance? One of the questions I kind of pondered is, are there any Orioles pitchers that use a foreign substance? What do you think?
I would guess just about all of them. I worked on the TARP crew in 2012, and these guys had foreign substances in their backpacks out in the bullpen. People were spraying sunscreen on their arms on a 55-degree Thursday night, so that they could get a little bit of extra stick on the ball. This is something that's been a part of the game for decades now. One way or the other, one substance or another. And to be honest with you, I think it's good for the hitters. You can certainly make the argument that, something like pine tar will help increase your spin rate, and it certainly will. It also helps you throw the ball where you want to throw it. So if I'm a hitter and I'm going up against, let's just say, Trevor Bauer is throwing a 96-mile-an-hour fastball at me, I want him to be able to locate that. I don't want to wear one in the ribs. So to be honest with you, if I'm a hitter, I'm not too concerned about it either. And I don't know. I feel like we're making something out of. I don't think it's something that needs to be investigated as deeply as it seems Major League Baseball is planning on investigating it.
Yeah, I'm on the complete other side. I think absolutely get rid of it. Yeah, because I think that ultimately you'll see, like in a economics class, you'll see kind of a course correction, right? You'll see guys that won't be able to locate it. They'll hit a batter or two. Somebody will get mad. Somebody will charge the mound, throw a few punches. That eventually, and those guys have to throw strikes. If they're too wild with the ball, they're going to have too many guys on base. So I think eventually, I think this could help somebody like Chris Davis, right? He's not going to see these mean, nasty sliders that come in on him. And he might have a fighting chance out there. Some of the other, all of the hitters, I think. You risk taking one in the ribs, but you also know that you're probably going to get one a little bit slower over the plate.
Yeah, that's certainly fair, and I can understand both sides of the argument. And just because it's something that's been a part of the game for so long, it doesn't make it legal or the right thing to do. But I just feel like no matter what happens, you're always going to find pitchers trying to find an edge. I mean, when you've got guys cranking 450-foot home runs on you, you're standing on the mound and Giancarlo Stanton is in the box across from you. You want to be able to make a pitch that's going to get him out. And I'm not saying that eliminating pine tar is going to prevent that. Pine tar, foreign substances, whatever it may be. But goop, yes, we'll call it goop. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's something that didn't really need to be addressed. But I certainly understand your argument, and I'll take that for what it's worth, and we'll see what happens, and whether or not Major League Baseball really decides to follow through on these threats, I guess, toward pitchers.
Now you might not mention you might not remember this, but you should ask your dad, Mr. Blake, if he remembers Phil Niekro for the New York Yankees. Back when he would have a nail file and would actually file the ball down a little bit, throw pitch, and then he actually the umpires came out and as he stood up to empty out his pockets, just kind of casually flew it out and thinking that nobody would see it. But to me, I keep thinking, well, okay, well, is there really a difference? I'm rubbing something on the ball or I'm, filing it down to make it kind of move around. Where is the line? The line is what the rule says. Yeah. Nothing should, so I am very interested to see what happens this year. Here's a question for you. They're asking whether or not, managers have the right to kind of go out there and have the ball checked. Do you think Brandon Hyde is the type of manager that would do that?
That's a really good question, and I don't feel like I know Brandon Hyde well enough to be able to answer that correctly. But if I had to guess, I don't think he would be, and I don't know why I lean that way. I don't know what it is about him that makes me say I don't think he would be that kind of guy. But I do think, however, that if an opposing manager were to do that to one of our pitchers, I think Hyde would be the guy to do it right back.
I agree. I'm the same way. I think Hyde's kind of one of those old school baseball guys that, it's one of those unwritten rules that he abides by. But you're right. He'd be really quick if somebody challenged his guy. He'd go right back out there and want to see the ball that Garrett Cole picked up.
I certainly think so. And I do have to backtrack real quick. You mentioned Phil Niekro. It's funny you mentioned a knuckleballer because R.A. Dickey, a more recent knuckleballer, he actually threw me one of his warm-up balls. I saw him throwing a bullpen down at Camden Yards several hours. It was when Utah Street was open. You can perch above the bullpen. But that ball literally stuck to my finger when he threw it to me. I don't know what was on it. I couldn't decipher the smell. I don't know if it was sunscreen or some type of other thing, but in the discussion of foreign substances and knuckleball pitchers and what are the rules, I figured I'd throw that little tidbit out there just because it's nice.
Fun. That's some nice history.
Now, one last thing I wanted to get into, and this is another thing that you actually brought up to me. The Orioles and Nationals sharing a market is something that they haven't seemed to be able to do very cordially in a way that the Redskins and Ravens, or sorry, the Washington football team and the Ravens seem to have done just fine. So go ahead and talk about what you wanted to dive into in that regard.
Oh, this is a whole can of worms. I'm not sure if we have enough time. But let's kind of take, it is really interesting when you think about it, right? Because there's other two market teams, right? There's the A's and Giants. You've got the Angels and the Dodgers, the Cubs and the White Sox, and then obviously you've got the Mets and the Yankees. As far as proximity goes, that's the other group that's in this tier. The big difference is those are some really big markets. Now you see some similarities, between you see the Oakland Athletics, right? They're a small market team. They have a small budget, but they don't seem to have the same type of problems that we do. You see it with other NFL teams. You see the Chargers and the Rams now both in LA. Obviously the Giants and the Jets over in New York, and you see it with the Washington football team and the Ravens. Football, I think, has it easier because they don't rely on the local media as much. For them, it's all about the national market, the national TV revenue rights. That and they, the way that they share revenue among all the teams, it's not as big of an issue. Not only that, it was less of an issue. A lot of people make the argument, look, before we've always had two teams, or we had two teams back when it was the Senators and the Orioles, and there was no problems back then. Very different back then. You didn't have nearly as many TVs. Everybody was just really listening to the games on radios, and the radios, went to all markets. Now you have blackout restrictions. A lot of this I think might be solved if you remove the blackout restrictions among the entire market. But yeah, it's a really difficult conundrum for both the teams. I feel like there's maybe some light at the end of the tunnel, but we'll see.
Yeah, and it's certainly difficult sharing a network, and I love the people who work for Masson, the on-camera personalities. These guys are great, and we're lucky to have them. But man, the things that Masson has done this offseason with, cutting out, not broadcasting spring training games, and getting rid of guys like Gary Thorne and Jim Hunter and Tom Davis and people who have been working for the team for quite some time. It's certainly frustrating. And, I have a relatively decent platform on Twitter, and I've certainly been guilty of talking a little smack and making some jokes here and there about the Orioles not being on Masson and certain things like that. But yeah, I don't know what it is about the differences between the Orioles and Nationals. I certainly think there's a little bit of a fan rivalry there, and I've certainly contributed to that myself. We wanted to be, the Nationals came in, the Orioles were not good for quite some time, and then both kind of started to find some success around the 2012 season. The Nationals were in the playoffs. They lost to the St. Louis Cardinals in the NLDS that year, same as the Orioles losing to the Yankees. And I think Oriole fans just wanted to kind of keep the title of the best team in the area. And, the Yankees, the Nationals, they're the Yankees of the National League to me. The Nationals go out and win a World Series in 2019. And now all of a sudden they're the big man on campus. And the Orioles are back at, vying for a number one overall pick for the third consecutive season. So, it's certainly interesting. And, I wish I had more knowledge of the ins and outs of what goes into marketing and broadcasting to a specific area, especially when multiple teams that don't necessarily love each other are involved. But it's something that I hope we start to see sorted out here in the near future.
Yeah, and I'm going to be really curious to see if any of these, any of the pieces that are influencing these problems are resolved with the next CBA agreement. Either through revenue sharing or something that the owners kind of come to the table and agree upon that maybe limit some of the difficulties that a team like the Orioles have been going through. A team that's a small market team that has one of the lowest payrolls consistently among baseball. Where you look at the Nationals, who are right there, I think, in the median as far as their spending, and what impact that has, on their marketability.
Yeah, certainly. And I definitely agree with what you said a moment ago about getting rid of the blackout restrictions. I'd be all in on that one. Now, that's all I've got. If there's anything else you wanted to touch on, I guess speak now or forever hold your peace, because I think we're nearing the 50-minute mark here, even though I had a little mishap near the beginning, but I'm glad we made it back on track here for a little bit.
This was a lot of fun. Yeah, I don't want to jinx it, but it looks like Baltimore might have taken one from the Yankees in spring training. But I like to see that. We had Hayes with an RBI single. So looks like things are on track. I like to see it when we beat the Yankees.
It's always fun, even when the games don't matter.
I agree.
Cody, I very much enjoyed this. Go ahead and tell the people about your podcast and plug whatever you want before we sign off here.
Sure. I always post it up on Twitter. So just search for I Just Like the Duck or at Orioles Podcast.
Sounds good. I am Give That Fan a Podcast. I have hardly used the Twitter account that I created for that pod, but I'm trying to get into it. I really am. I'm going to post all my old episodes there. Hopefully have some new ones coming out for you. And you were actually on the show when my Birdland Tonight debut. It was you, me, Jimmy, Matt, and Josh. And I was talking a big game about how I've been able to get these good guests on the show.
No kidding.
And ever since then, I've struck out. I've been reaching out to people, and it hasn't worked out. So, I reached out to someone who had told me that they'd come on the podcast, and I guess they're big leaguing me now. But that's all right. So I'm trying to get back on track. I feel like I'm not very good at just talking to myself. So I might bring a co-host on at some point. I might try to get some more fan interaction. I might go live on StreamYard and try to get some fans to chime in. I mean, after all, the podcast is called Give That Fan a Podcast, so I might as well give the fans a little bit of a voice. So we'll see what the future of the podcast is.
Ask your old man to join you one day.
You know what? That would be a fun discussion. We could talk for days. We might set the record for the longest live stream. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. I think Josh is going to be working on an outro here for Birdland Tonight at some point. But for now, I think it's just kind of a hard ending. So thank you all so much for tuning in. And you can, again, follow Cody at Orioles Podcast. You can follow me at Rye Guy Blake. I'm also at Orioles Fan Probs with a Z, at Give That Fan a Pod right down on the bottom of the screen there. And we will see you again on Birdland Tonight throughout the year.
Take care, Ryan.
You too.